The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, so I think we got all the bugs kinked out. So we're officially starting the June version of our Technical Advisory Committee meeting. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate everybody that could be here in attendance today. So by now, I'm pretty comfortable. Everybody's pretty familiar with the nuances of the online system, but just remember there's a chat box if you want to enter, and you can be unmuted through that, and it's an open forum, so everybody knows the process. So if you have any questions, though, just step up and let me know, and we can work it out with Sarah and the rest of the team. So with that, I think we're going to move forward, and I guess the typical first order of action is to see if we have any members of the public who wish to speak. So at this point, I'll give a few seconds to see if there's any members of the public that want to speak at this time. Okay, going once, going twice. It appears that we have no members from the public, so we will move forward with the approval of the minutes, which were sent out with the agenda. So hopefully everybody's reviewed them. Is there anybody that has comments or questions on the minutes from the May meeting? Okay, hearing none, I guess we will now need a motion to approve the meetings. Can I get a motion? And make sure also that whoever does do the motions, can you please state your name when you make the motion?
Nicole McCleary, motion to approve.
Dan Jorgensen, second.
Second.
Could you repeat who did the second?
Jonathan Scott.
Did you get that? Okay, with that, all in favor? Well, again, kind of like what we've done before, I'll assume everybody's in favor. Is there anybody that is a nay on the minutes? Yes, I know it's a formality, but we have to do our due diligence. So thank you very much. So I think that takes care of the precursor items. And Sarah, it looks like you're up next anyway for the FY 2025 Transportation Improvement Program agenda item.
Yes. All right. And can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
I will go ahead and get started then. This, like every year, is the update to the Transportation Improvement Program. This year, the work program covers fiscal years 21 through 25, and will go into effect October 1 of this year. As far as how the TIP is organized and what's in it, this is the first 5 years of the long-range transportation plan that was newly adopted in November. It covers all the projects for federal funds, showing each phase and the year for what is funded. The presentation is sort of split into two. Initially, we'll go over the highlights and the major changes from last year. And then the back half of the presentation looks at the priority projects for future funding. We also include the local projects and their funding information for transparency purposes as well. As far as the MPO's role in the Transportation Improvement Program, again, we have the priority list, which is quote unquote our wish list. It accounts for about 15 to 20 million a year, and we have discretion over a couple of federal programs as well as state programs to prioritize projects. The initial two federal projects are the Transportation Alternatives Program as well as the Surface Transportation Program. So we have all of our non-motorized walk bike safety projects in that first program, and then other discretionary funds as well. The MPO also has the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee, and this is where we prioritize our regional projects. And this utilizes the Transportation Regional Incentives Program, and then also the Sun Trail Program. The MPO does have the ability to remove federally funded projects from the work program, but does not direct how any additional fundings or where those monies should otherwise be spent. As far as where we are in the process, the MPO does this every year. Every June we hold a public hearing. So we did this last year and approved both the work program and our priorities. In December, we got a snapshot of the tentative work program, reviewing the highlights of what we expected to be in this TIP update. And then in April, we receive a snapshot, and that is what we use to develop the work program and the TIP document. We are holding a public hearing tomorrow, June 30th, where we will update the 5-year work program, as well as Table 2 for the priority list. So as far as what's in the work program this year, you can see there's $3.6 billion within the work program. This does include the $1.4 billion that was allocated for the West Shore interchange, as well as $442 million for the project of the ramps coming in and out of the West Shore interchange, also known as Section 5. As far as the local capital improvement projects, that accounts for a total of $2.1 billion as well. So this pie chart shows the breakdown of the FDOT work program by work type. Ports and airports account for about 37%. Road widening, again, this includes the West Shore interchange as well as the Section 5. Funding accounts for about 36%. We have our bridges and maintenance, which is our maintaining our system program, about 12%. Transit accounts for just under 4%. We have our intersections and ITS technology projects, or smart cities program, at about 7%, and then planning just under 1.5%, and our walk bike at just under 1% as well. We, based on a request from the CAC, we did separate out the freight rail, and that accounts for about 0.12%. This table is just showing the fluctuation in the percentage of funding over the last few years. As you can see, there's a dip in our road widening or capacity projects, and then that has increased again with the inclusion of the West Shore interchange. And this is a similar table looking at the split of funds by work type for our local capital improvement program, again totaling about $2.1 billion this year. As far as our discretionary funds that the MPO does prioritize for, this slide summarizes the use of those transportation alternative and surface transportation program funds. We have the Vision Zero corridor studies that have moved forward, as well as some bridge replacement studies. The Heights Mobility Plan moving forward with some safety projects along Highland, as well as the HART bus replacements that we continue to prioritize. We have our integrated corridor management. This is looking at some technology along parallel corridors to the interstate to help with congestion. And then we have a summary of our walk bike safety improvements. As you can see, the walk bike accounts for about 14% of this this year, or in the next 5 years. And then we have numerous projects that are moving forward, including Florabraska being brought back, as well as some enhancements along Kennedy, and then Florida Avenue and the West River Greenway. So this is where we get into the highlights of what has changed from the last time we adopted the Transportation Improvement Program. We do tie this to our 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan, again, that we adopted in November. We have the 4 program categories, and then the last category is our major capacity projects or our major investments. So the first 4 are our good repair and resiliency. Then we have our safety projects in Vision Zero. Our technology projects to help with congestion is our Smart Cities program. And then the expansion of our transit system, as well as our trails, is what within our Rail Choices When Not Driving. We also include our performance targets and safety targets within the TIP as well for coordination. So as far as the projects, again, these are the major highlights of what's different from last year. We have numerous resurfacing projects that are added every year. We also have our transit bus replacements and bus stop capital that we prioritize for HART. And then we have our bridge repair within this category, a specific project I-75 over the Alafaya River. And then we have various locations throughout Hillsborough County for substructure repair. Our Vision Zero category, this again is our safety projects, a lot of walk bike projects as well. We have Fowler Avenue, that was an existing priority, looking at safety enhancements from 275 to I-75. This would be design funded for fiscal year 25. We also have numerous design phases for a new priority as well as additional FDOT priorities, and this is including 21st Ave, 22nd Street, 109th Ave, as well as Tampa Palms Boulevard. You'll see Interbay there. That is a new City of Tampa priority that will be in the second half of the presentation as well. They were able to get the design phase funded for a complete street from Manhattan to Bayshore. We also have a continued lighting program at various locations throughout Hillsborough County, and those are summarized in the appendix and the TIP document. We also have 40th Street. This was to look at some additional roundabouts on the southern portion from Hillsborough to State Road 60. This is a project development and environmental phase that is funded for fiscal year 25 that'll also look at some other design treatments other than just roundabouts. We also have a new priority for design for fiscal year 25, looking at 50th, 56th Street from 60 to Fletcher. This is additional Vision Zero operation improvements. Again, our smart cities, this is looking at the use of technology as well as intersection and interchange improvements. We have 2 new signal crosswalks that will be going in on Florida Ave from Idlewild to, or at Idlewild and at Knollwood. We have some interchange improvements at I-4 towards the Polk County line, as well as our intelligent transportation systems. This is looking at adding technology near the Gandy Bridge at Del Mabry to help with congestion. And that is a construction phase for fiscal year 25. We have the final 2 portions of the Green Spine Cycle Track were able to be funded for construction in fiscal year 21. This is the furthest west along Cass Street, as well as the furthest east on 15th Street. We were also able to get the West River Greenway, the Stewart Middle School connector, funded for construction in fiscal year 24. And then we were able to, the South Coast Greenway at Big Bend Pedestrian Overpass, this is the design for fiscal year 21. And this also was our first bit of Sun Trail funding that we were able to get for, or within Hillsborough County. Our major investments category, this includes, or we continue to work with DOT and Hillsborough County to move up the I-75 at Gibsonton interchange to do the ultimate rebuild of this. This is the design phase for fiscal year 25. And then our TV Next status update. The Howard Franklin Bridge, as well as the West Shore Interchange and Lois to Willow Avenue, were all funded for construction. We have a partial funding for operational improvements on the ramp from I-4 to I-275 North, near where the Florabraska entrance ramp comes in, to help out with some operational improvements there as well. We also have the I-275, the adding 2 lanes north of downtown to Hillsborough Avenue. This is a design phase for $46 million. There's no construction on this project currently. I include this map in here for reference to know the sections for the TV Next projects. right? And for the second half of the presentation, this is where I'll go over our priority process and the new priorities that we did receive. And again, these are for future funding. So as far as our prioritization process, it again is tied to our long-range transportation plan. We have each of those categories that I went over before, and then sort of the ranking criteria, looking at the different state of transit projects. Again, our bridges and resurfacing, those are all at the top of the list. We then go into our safety projects, where we look at the total crashes, severe crashes, and crashes per centerline mile. Our Smart Cities program, we look at the travel time reliability associated with the project. And then our real choices, we look at sort of the density rating of population and jobs for increased accessibility. Our major projects, we look at job density in relation to the project, as well as the forecasted traffic congestion and the delay reduction. This is sort of a time frame of how we develop the priorities every year. We adopt them along with the work program every year. And then in February, we go out to our local agencies and have one-on-one meetings where we discuss existing priorities, as well as any future priorities that they might be applying for or moving forward. We then get priority letters from the jurisdictions by middle of March, and then any applications that are needed with any new projects or updated applications are submitted to the department by the end of March. In May, June timeframe, we present the priorities to the committees and then again approve them with the work program. As far as the new priorities we received this year, we have the TBARTA Van Pool program. They requested $800,000 in fiscal year 26. We're recommending $200,000 annually be funded for this project. We did meet with TBARTA and FDOT, and they were in agreement with our recommendation. We have two new safety projects. This is from Tampa in coordination with Hillsborough County, looking at Interbay from West Shore to Bay Shore. Again, this was the design phase was added for this project. They're asking $4.5 million for construction. And then we have Twigs from Ashley to Nebraska. This is $3 million requested for construction along that corridor. We then have our State Road 574 from US 301 to Turkey Creek. This is a request from the department looking at multiple multimodal safety improvements, fixing medians and adding medians, bike lanes, closing sidewalk gaps, as well as ADA improvements. And then we have a new project there you see in red. This is, it is in red because it was added since we started giving these presentations. This is the North Downtown Grid multimodal improvements. Also the Ashley Drive redesign in the northern portion of downtown. The city is requesting $5.2 million through MPO priority monies. And then the department has committed an additional $5 million to help implement this project. We also got 2 traffic signals from the city of Tampa that would need to be coordinated with the department. These are $500,000 each. Looking at State Road 60 at 26th Street, this is near the IKEA. And then Spruce Boy Scout at Manhattan in the West Shore District. We have State Road 60 from east of Dover to Polk County line. The widening project was removed from our LRTP for this. DOT has instead agreed to look at intersection improvements along this corridor. HART has requested $3.5 million for a CSX study as sort of their next phase of any negotiations or right-of-way that would be needed. Fowler Avenue Underpass, PD&E. This was from Temple Terrace. A PD&E was requested for this. And then the last 2 there from HART, looking at electric bus and electric bus infrastructure, as well as automated vehicle facilities and infrastructure. I have this in here. These are the Chair's Coordinating Committee recommended priorities. We have the funded ones at the top, the Howard Franklin Bridge, and Gateway Express, I-75 at Overpass, this is in Pasco County, I-275 express lanes in Pinellas County, as well as the Big Bend interchange, I-75. And then you see we have the West Shore interchange was funded, as well as the Central Avenue BRT in Pinellas County. As far as the unfunded priorities, we still have I-75 at Gibsonton, as well as the operational improvements north of downtown, and the regional rapid transit in the I-275 corridor, as well as, again, support for the CSS negotiations with HART, all within Hillsborough County. As far as our recommend actions, we have the approval of the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 21 through 25, as well as the Transportation Improvement Program priorities for future funding. So with that, that is my presentation. And if we have any questions, please let me know.
So moved. I'd make the motion to approve the TIP.
Who made the motion?
Bob Fry, Thea.
Oh, okay. Hold on just one second, Bob. Just make sure there's no comments or questions on her presentation, and then we'll go forward with that. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask on Sarah's presentation? I take it that's a no. Sarah, first of all, I very much appreciate that it was very comprehensive. I certainly personally would agree with all of the CCC recommendations. And I did just want to comment that I like seeing some of the projects that have come up before this committee and other committees actually getting added to the list. For example, some of the electric bus replacement or infrastructure improvements for HART, and also the underpass for Fowler Avenue. I know those are things that were talked about. Just getting them on the list, I know they're a long way out. It just feels like that's progress moving forward. So I appreciate seeing that on there. So with that, no other questions. I'll give you one final opportunity from the group. Okay, Bob, one more time, if I could ask you to make the motion.
Bob Fry from Thea. So moved. Approve the Transportation Improvement Year fiscal year 21 to 25 and the Transportation Improvement Program priorities for future funding as presented.
All right, thank you, Bob. Do we have a second?
Christine Hunt to second.
Okay, all in favor, I'll assume is an aye. Do we have any nays? Silence means unanimity. So I appreciate that. We will move forward with the next agenda item. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
All right, and the next one, I know it's Vision 0. Make sure I title it right here. Give me 1 second. I'm working two computers. Yes, next up is Vision 0 with Paula Flores, I believe.
Yeah, and Paula, do you want me to make you the presenter, or do you want me to flip through it for you?
It would be easier if I could share the screen, but if you want to, whatever is easy.
All right, you should be the presenter.
Okay, hold on a second. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Good afternoon. My name is Paula Flores with Freeman Peterson. Before I get started, I would like to refer you back to the draft report that's in your packet, because I will only be giving you some Cliff Notes version of this report. So quickly, the study objectives, are actually the goal is very simple. It's really to just improve public health and safety by reducing road fatalities and serious injuries. The study objectives also identified some of the desired outcomes, which some of these will be reflected in our recommendations later on. So I'm not going to go through them. The study overall, there were 5 different tasks. I'm going to go through very quickly on some of these. The presentation focuses more on the latest steps taken in the development of the actual plan. So stakeholder engagement was comprehensive, and here are all the partners that joined us on this journey. We have had 3 meetings, one in last May, October, and April, where representatives from each of the agencies contributed to the process. They were, these partners were very integral partners, especially when it came to identifying and prioritizing factors to be considered later on in the project. And I'll be talking about all of these factors a little bit. But our partners were also very important in sharing some of their countermeasures that are already being used by either the state, by the county, and even the city, such as, even treatments that we've seen on operation on Fletcher, along with others that the stakeholder group felt would be very effective on the corridors that we're assessing in this study. So we did solicit examples from our local partners. We reviewed other statewide efforts, and we will be relying heavily on a lot of national best practices on speed management, as this is an emerging specialization in safety. But, for example, the US DOT already has a publication back from May 2014 that was developed to help states and municipalities reduce speeding related crashes that result in fatalities and injuries. And this requires a comprehensive look and concerted effort involving these focused factors such as data-driven approaches, research and evaluation, technology, enforcement, engineering, education, and communication. And all of that you'll see throughout our plan that it's all incorporated. So the next task, corridor prioritization. This is one of our biggest tasks that we perform throughout the project and the study. And we started by looking at, for example, this is an example of an assessment that we did and probably one of the most critical. So we looked at the top 20 high injury corridors, and what this table represents from prior presentations, if you recall, is that when we compare the posted speeds to national best practices identified by both ITE and CNU, we identified that 70% of all the corridors that are on this high priority list exceed, their posted speeds exceed national best practices by a minimum of 5 to 10 miles an hour. And 15% of these corridors have speeds that are 15 to 20 miles per hour above national best practice. This is critical because if someone is hit, for example, a pedestrian is hit by a vehicle traveling at 40 miles an hour or higher, the chances of survival are less than 20%. Yet at 20 miles per hour, the rate of survival if hit is closer to 90%. And this is all due to the lack of adequate reaction time if you're driving at higher speeds, and even your peripheral vision as you drive at higher speeds is diminished. So, but please note that most drivers travel at least another 5 to 10 miles an hour above the posted speed limit. So we have a problem here on these corridors and a lot of the corridors in our community, and it's a serious one no less. So we need to really manage speed in our corridors, unless, because otherwise we won't be achieving Vision Zero. We wanted to just share with you some fatal crash statistics that we found from some of the top 20 high injury corridors. For example, 60% happened at mid-block locations, not at the intersection proper. 71% of the fatal crashes had aggressive driving and speed-related contributing factors, such as erratic, reckless driving, aggravated maneuvers, ran off the road, and so forth. And 83% occurred during non-peak hours, which goes without saying that when it's not congested during peak and you have lower volumes but excess capacity on our streets, then the speeds are higher and hence can expose everyone to higher fatalities and serious crashes. So I had mentioned that through the stakeholder input, we had identified various prioritization factors, and they're all shown on here. But besides just looking at the severity crash rate, we developed a risk performance level that simply states if the risk on a corridor is high, the higher the exposure to vulnerable users, the more likely severity crashes can occur. Hence, the higher the points applied, and hence the higher the priority the corridor became. So in light of, and I wanted to also mention here that in light of everything that is going on in our country related to equity and justice, More work needs to be done, but this study does use equity and the effects of transportation safety on communities of concern as a priority factor. We still have more work to do on this, but I wanted to highlight that for you. So we use this system, these 7 factors, for all of the quarters. And on this next table, we show the top 20 quarters, and we gave these factors a weighted average and developed the final score shown on the last column, which is our priority scoring. The highest priority quarters are those with the orange boxes in the score column, including Brandon, Hillsborough, Fletcher, Dale Mabry, Bruce B. Downs, Shelton, Kennedy, and Florida. As some of these quarters are already under evaluation by their jurisdictional agency, we were also asked to identify that what are the next 30 and also prioritize them. So this list, this is the next 30 high injury quarters in all of Hillsborough County. The list is hard to read, but it includes other well-known quarters such as MLK, Big Bend, Bush, extensions of Hillsborough Avenue further to the east, Waters, Progress Boulevard, Memorial Highway. The map shows.
Do you want questions?
I'm sorry.
Do you want questions during or after?
After, so can we at least get through some of the slides?
Sure. Thank you.
All right, sure. So where was I? So the map shows existing top 20 in blue and the next 30 in green. And bottom line is we have a lot of work to do on a lot of these quarters, and it's time we get started. We also went through the same process of evaluation of these quarters, and we prioritized them based on the same factors. And we saw a lot of similarities in all of them, but we actually even identified a few quarters that scored slightly higher than the ones that were on the top 20. So here comes the fun part, the strategies and countermeasures, and then the actions and implementation strategy. But before we get started, I wanted to just refresh everybody's memory that per Vision Zero principles, safety is very complex. And in order to have a safe travel for all users, we must have safe streets, safe speeds, safe vehicles, and safe people. But considering that a third of the US population does not drive, especially our most vulnerable, safe people should be one of our first priorities. Because focusing even on people first will also create better outcomes on our streets, including improving walkability, livability, and connectivity to services, jobs, schools, and parks. So what we have done, we have developed this aggressive driving crash countermeasures toolkit, and we divided it all up into safe people first and safe streets, and I'll go through those in a second. Other speed management documents simply refer to good traffic calming measures, but this toolkit really provides national and international good practices at your fingertips. So this toolkit also is not, honestly, it is not all exhaustive, but rather a great start based on the conditions that we saw in the top 20 quarters or top 50. The toolkit also indicates what area type, for example, is it applicable in an urban, suburban, or rural area? Or location type, you know, can you apply it at an intersection location in a slow street or a neighborhood street versus an arterial corridor? So when you think about, you know, keeping people safe, this toolkit has a laundry list of different countermeasures, including things such as raised pedestrian crossings, wider sidewalks, refuge islands, pedestrian crossings, and the list goes on. The next toolkit is for safe streets, and this toolkit includes everything from traffic calming techniques, narrower travel lanes, roundabouts, raised intersections, you know, eliminating acceleration lanes, that we saw a lot of them in some areas in some of these quarters, introducing street lighting, two-waying streets, and of course, you can't go through this list without looking at the bottom that talks about reevaluation of context class and even the target speed limit for the quarter. Safe streets continues here on this other slide. We looked at freeway interchanges. We were surprised how many we found, you know, on several quarters like Dale Mabry and others and we decided to incorporate in here some redesigning of high-speed off-ramps, providing for safer continuous bike lanes and reevaluating the target speed and how these off-ramps are being designed. On the bottom half of this table, we talk more now about safe traffic operations, including increasing number of traffic signals to provide more connectivity, lowering the speeds, and target speed signal coordination in a corridor. Our toolkit also talks about countermeasures for enforcement and education campaigns and PSAs. We encourage the use of automated speed enforcement, red light cameras, and targeted enforcement on these high injury network corridors, including, in school zones. And yes, the world has changed, and we will be looking at the enforcement recommendations carefully to make sure that they are equitable. But I also wanted to point out the PSAs that we've got listed in here, and it's about educating the public about a lot of new things that are happening, the evolution in our streets that some people are just not aware of, the consequences and decisions that they make as they drive. So for this section, actions and implementation, I am going to refer you back to the packet that you received because it has a lot of detail and it's very long. I'm simply going to go through, highlight the actions for each of the sections of the recommendation plan on its speed setting, engineering and operations, enforcement, policy, legislative, and evaluation. So there's many examples in the more elaborate package that you have in your hands, but please feel free to ask me any questions. So when we talk about a speed setting, we identified 3 different actions, which was regional context classification. We know that the state FDOT already has it for their streets. We are very well aware that Hillsborough County already has a draft for all of their county roadways. But we have to start compiling all these, making sure that they are reflective of future land uses in our community and are published so everybody knows exactly what it is. We ask for immediate evaluation of all the projects. It doesn't matter if they're just being talked about, conceptualized, if they're already in the design stages, stop and pause for a second and take a look at how can we better integrate some of these speed management countermeasures that we've identified through this process. Under engineering and operations, we had 8 actions identified, and by the way, they are color-coded, so the orange is for short-term improvements over the next couple of years, midterm and long-term improvements. So under engineering and operations, we talk about, let's start looking at some of these top 50 corridors. Let's start programming them. Let's start coming up with preliminary evaluations on them so we can do the programming and identify the funding to eventually design and implement some of the recommendations. Update your design manuals and design standards. It doesn't matter if it's, again, from concept to construction, all the process, the entire process has to be looked at. Make sure to incorporate some design flexibility to reflect some of these national best practices and making sure that we can apply all the tools that are readily available to us. And the list continues all the way to the bottom here on this one. Education and enforcement, 5 immediate actions that we're going to take a look at a little bit more closely to make sure, again, that they're equitable, but a lot of detail in those as it is. Policy and legislation, as transportation professionals, we typically don't like to get into this area, but it's important that we start supporting changes to laws and regulations as necessary to ensure people are protected to the greatest extent possible. For example, set more harder or Vision Zero crash reduction goals. We should really be doing and prioritizing projects to save lives much faster than what our current goals are. Reviewing and updated land use policies to ensure that we are creating walkable, safe, and healthy communities. Review and initiate new traffic safety legislation measures that are always in our legislature. So there's a lot of things here that we can do. There's a lot that all of us on this call and all agencies can start tackling, and we urge everybody to help us get through that. And of course, plan evaluation. We must evaluate and develop metrics and timeframes for the plan to be updated. Establish quarterly updates of the management plan. Establish not just quantitative measures, but also qualitative measures. You know, how are we doing? Are we successfully reducing speed on our corridors? Are we seeing crash fatality and serious injury reductions? You know, how many corridors, be proactive, you know, how many corridors in our community are we addressing, either reactively or proactively, and so forth. Because if we don't measure, there won't be any success. So right now, the stakeholder group has, we did have a meeting with them at the end of April. They are reviewing the draft plan. We hope to finalize this plan, but we are asking this committee today to approve the speed management action plan, the MPO board for approval. That's all I have.
Okay. I have, I guess, a question on that. When you say forwarding this plan to the MPO board for approval, what is the what's the outcome? What are you trying? How is this being enforced or required of jurisdictions to retrofit? What are we recommending? So far, it was a great informational, presentation. But my question is, you're asking us to approve it, to send it forward to the MPO board. What does that mean?
Hey, Paula, I'm going to answer
Yes.
this. Yeah.
Sure, Gina, thank you.
Hi, everybody. As with all our plans, unfortunately, they're plans and they have to be implemented. We don't have the enforcement of law to make anybody do anything, but we do have the support of our stakeholders, like the county, who have asked Paula to come and talk to their staff about how we can start implementing the recommendations out of this action plan. So that's how this thing moves forward. And to have the MPO board say, this is a good set of tools in the toolbox for these countermeasures, and we like the idea, we like the actions that are being suggested. Let's incorporate that as we move forward in developing our roadway designs and other, programming our budgets. So that's, I think that the MPO doesn't dictate what anyone does, but we do develop plans for recommendations.
Okay.
And I think, in a couple of the recommendations that we have listed in the details, talks about potentially even setting up committee to take a look at management, take a look at safety across all agencies, and have a better coordination of some of the projects and outcomes that should be expected from the investments that we make. So those, all of those are very valid and something that needs to be entertained at all levels. So we hope that this is a guide. This is a starting point for more collaboration and more communication between all the agencies involved, because that's the only way we're going to, reduce crashes, fatal crashes in our community.
Well, my concern is this is a great informational thing, and I think that it's great for agencies to be looking into that. I know that looking at your toolbox, we've done a lot of those. My biggest concern is it is nowhere near a level to update design manuals and standards based on making a commitment to do that is a much bigger task than this or just this toolbox. And there's going to be it has to be a lot more data and methodology behind it that's consistent before you start going in and putting something as standards. So I've got that's where I start getting a little, looking at this and trying to do this stuff is great, but just the way that each of those first 30 corridors were evaluated. Do you weight each one of those? What scale went into it? For example, if you have a low crash rate, do you get more points than speed? Who determines that? There's a lot there that it's more than just approval when you start to put stuff like telling jurisdictions to update their design manuals and plans. There's got to be some engineering behind it and some analysis besides just a study and then us making that type of a recommendation, considering we are the technical advisory committee. So we should have some technical discussions, I would think. That's just my point of view on it.
Can you identify yourself for the record, please?
Oops, I'm sorry, this is Gina. Did someone want to speak? I didn't want to speak over you.
That was
I'm sorry, I was asking, I think it was Mr. Frey that was speaking. Can you ID yourself for the
I'm
record?
sorry. Yep, Bob Fry, I'm with the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
This is Gina Torres with the MPO again. I just wanted to just stress how involved our stakeholders were in attending those meetings and responding. Again, I just use the county as an example. They want to find, they are currently identifying context classifications for their roadways and updating their design manual. So this is like prime time for them to, if you're going to say the context of this roadway is, you know, suburban or urban, and you think that the posted speeds recommended are in this particular range, well, the design of that road has to allow drivers to not feel comfortable exceeding those speeds. It's all data driven, it's all technical. The analysis is deep.
Well, Gina, just on that, just what you brought up. How many of those toolbox items that you implement is considered enough to be considered a meeting goals of Vision Zero? Do you have to do all of them? If there's a disagreement on one, but you've done 9 of the others, what is the weight of, for example, how many signalized crossings per mile versus and the elevated refuge, separation of pedestrian facilities from the roadway and bicycle facilities from the roadway, all of those, yet we focus on one that you're not doing. That's where I start to have a little bit of a problem. At what point did you do enough? You mentioned earlier, Paula, in your presentation, that if you don't do this, we can't attain Vision Zero. I thought Vision Zero was 0 crashes on the roadway. Is the metric, is that what we're trying to attain? Or is it that we have to implement all these things? That's where this gets a little bit murky.
Okay, let's break it down in a couple of steps. Vision Zero is about reducing fatal crashes and serious injuries. Not all crashes,
Yes.
Fatal and serious injuries, right? Because those are the ones that have the greatest impact, not only on lives, but also on the economy and the costs associated with fatalities and serious injuries. So when you focus on that, we're not looking to eliminate all crashes. That is a goal that has never been identified through Vision Zero. Now, when you mention what tools, need to be included, not one tool is going to resolve everything, right? And this study, looking at it from a very high level at all of these quarters and providing, methods for evaluating them and their priority based on exposure, close proximities to schools, transit routes, communities of concern, and all of that. The next step will be for the agencies involved to have these top 50 quarters to start looking and doing more detailed engineering on all of them in priority ranking based on, funding availability. At that moment is when they're going to start to determine, how serious is the speeding issue? Where are the severe crashes that are happening, the fatal ones and severe injuries? What are some of the tools that would minimize them in that particular context, that particular location, that particular corridor? And then when you figure that out, then you try to, there's a systems approach to safety when it comes to Vision Zero, that if you need those types of tools, if it's high visibility crossings or additional signals in one location, then you have to apply or should be applying it in similar locations along that same corridor as a preventative measure. So we're not identifying that at this point. We're just giving you, here's a toolbox for all of the different things for you to think about. Not all of them are appropriate in every corridor location, but it's a combination of different ones. And sometimes you may have to go back and do more because you don't know how driver behavior reacts to some of these tools.
But you're including a list of roadways that you went in and evaluated. So what you are, that's where I agree with everything you said, and that the toolbox is great and we should implement them. But you're ranking a list of roadways, and then you're applying a standard that whether or not you do if they don't have separated bicycle facilities because they can't afford that or because of the geometrics, do they get dinged on that and get put on the top 30 list? Because is that one of the ones? Who determines that?
No.
That's what I'm trying to, where I'm getting from is it's moving, it's a mix of things. We're talking, putting together a toolbox, which is great, and I think we should do it. We do safety audits every year looking at this stuff and making it safer. At the same time, when we start putting a list of roadways in there and determining which ones weigh more than the others, that's where I have a problem making a recommendation to the MPO board that we should approve this.
Mr. Fry, the tables are really just prioritizing based on exposure. We're not saying, what treatment is applicable in any of those quarters, or just saying if you were to tackle in a priority way of investing, then invest in the communities that need it the most, from equitability, from a crash severity, from number of schools in proximity to that quarter, because that obviously affects the young, our children, and so forth.
100%. For example, I would say school proximity should weigh more than some of the others, and that type. But there's nothing in there that shows how we're coming up to that. That's, like I said, and I don't feel like, I feel this conversation, this is the place to have it. We're supposed to be the technical advisory committee, so these are the type of things that we should be able to talk about, shouldn't we?
The stakeholder committee met on this. They all were very supportive of the process that we took along this. And the agencies, as far as all the feedback we've received, are very comfortable and actually very delighted to have some sort of a plan here that can really push forward some of the priorities that they need to focus on. So we have received a lot of feedback from the agencies, FDOT, the county, and the city.
Okay, hey, Paula and Bob, let me jump in here as chair to kind of keep things moving forward. Paula, first, I appreciate everything that you've put out today, and your recommendations are certainly well received. One thing I think to kind of acknowledge with Bob's comments is we are the technical advisory committee, so we tend to look at things, at least some of us do, in a more kind of engineering and type kind of detailed work. As a matter of fact, I have a similar question. My primary question was about your weighting on that scale. Like, can you pull up the next 30 injury list, that chart that you had? Because I don't think it matched what I had in my action plan that was attached to my agenda. Because there was some inconsistencies in there that I couldn't explain. Now, you might have to share your screen again, unless I'm not seeing it.
I'm trying to pull back up again. Hold on a second.
No problem. No rush.
And there was also a switch in criteria from the list before that, the first 30, where they scored them based on Vision Zero. The next one went to high crash. Correct?
No.
What I noticed is that
the same way.
Well, I noticed the second 30 didn't have 2 of the criteria included in the chart. I don't know, that may have still been part of it, but they just didn't show it. But mine had to do with the final numbers.
That was one of my questions I had too. Okay.
And I'll tell you, Paula, while you're pulling it up, I'll tell you kind of my perspective on this. And I'm not an expert, I sit on this committee and try to just give a different perspective on how we look at things. And when I think of Vision Zero and I think of roadways, I do a fair amount of traveling. And certainly some of the ones, and you didn't pick what the top 20 and the top 30 are, and I know that. But when I think about things, yes, Brandon Boulevard is terrible. Dale Mabry can be really bad. But for me personally, Hillsborough Avenue between Orient and Florida Avenue is like a video game. And it is to me, got to be one of the most dangerous. And it didn't rank until the second 30. But because I'm like, that's the one that I kind of point at, I was looking at the chart and how it ranked, because I kind of focused on it. And it came out again, I'm looking at the one that was attached to our agenda, and it scored only a 2.7. And then I look at the end of the chart, and there's one that says ML King Boulevard, and it's showing that the performance level was good across the board, yet it ranked a 3, meaning that it was worse than Hillsborough Avenue. So it just wasn't intuitive to me about how these things were rated that you could have that discrepancy. And again, and then there was another example. The second one on the chart was a 1.3, and it seemed to have, you know, quite a few poor performing elements, and it was all the way down at a 1.3. Now, again, I didn't get a chance to study it when you went through your presentation. It appeared to be different. The numbers were different than what we got, so maybe there was an adjustment made. But again, as the technical committee, we tend to look for those kind of things. So Bob's comments are warranted. I think in the end, I mean, I'm okay with going forward with it, but these kind of things are of a concern, but not so much the recommendations on the whole. I think we should be considering all those crash aversion measures on any project. It's to whether when you get to the hard details of ranking something that there's a concern.
Well, and I believe that stakeholder committee absolutely should come forward to the MPO board, put their recommendations forward, and sign. I'm all for that. They basically know this stuff inside and out, and they were there. We're being asked on a 10-minute presentation to say, all right, and there's a lot of stuff in there, and it moved around a lot of from our rankings to what we're to toolbox to what the actual actions and enforcements were. It was a wide range. So that's why I wanted to have some discussion before just motioning and moving it forward. Because when the board sees it, they're going to say that we did our due diligence, and if the TAC said it's good, technically. And I just want to make sure we at least had some discussions on it.
Great.
Let me ask if anyone else on the committee would like to weigh in on this discussion so far. Okay. In an effort to kind of keep things moving forward, because I don't really, you know, I'm not really sure what the answer is, and I couldn't see the updated chart, but I don't know if there's kind of somewhere in the middle that maybe we can, and I'm throwing this out for discussion, not necessarily as a particular motion, but maybe we can move forward with the motion to, at least from the tax perspective, to move forward with the recommendations portion of the action plan with, you know, and maybe word it better than this, but not necessarily the rankings based on concerns about how the different corridors were scored. Anybody have an opinion on that? Bob, would that be satisfactory to you?
Yes, I have no problems. Am I on mute? Oh, no. I have no problems moving forward, and that these recommendations that they should be included in safety audits in the future, and I have no problem going there. I just don't want it to become an enforcement type of issue. That's where I was getting. That's where I start getting nervous when we start going down that way. But I have no problem going forward with the recommendations. We're all for Vision Zero. We're trying for it on all of our roadways. So I have no problem doing that. I just want to make sure we all understand what it means that what we're recommending to the board.
Okay.
So I'll even make the motion. I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations going forward to the MPO board.
Okay, as submitted with no changes?
Well, with any data changes that need to occur to make it consistent with your comments. I just want to make sure the data is correct.
Right. Okay. Okay. I mean, that's, like I said, I'm okay with that. So with that, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Jay Collins. I'll second his motion.
Okay, thank you, Jay. So I guess but you can't say, are there any opposed? Okay, and let me kind of clarify, is there any concerns from the MPO staff about that motion? And that's, I think it's pretty clear that we're pretty much going forward with it, just, trying to make sure that the numbers are accurate in the final report because they weren't matching up with our draft agenda item.
Yeah, take a look. There's a lot more detail than maybe what you were able to look at. The action plan is posted through that link. And I think, I think there's will be a lot less concern about dictating anything on any particular roadway, as we know when we get down to actually doing something on those, what can be done is very different than what we might want to see. That's why there's lots of tools in the toolbox. But no, I think this is great. I love the discussion. I'm happy that the TAC is interested. I'm guessing that other people out there are interested because only 2 of you have been speaking about it. But I'm going to send something out to everybody. We want this to be something that's useful. So I love the feedback. Thank you very much.
And please do not take my discussion as a negative. It's just I wanted to discuss the items. Paula, it has nothing to do with the subject matter presented or anything like that. I just feel like I wanted to ask the questions and have a discussion on it. So it was not a negative conversation at all for my part. That's just, I just wanted to discuss. Thank you.
Much appreciated. And this is a draft document. We will make sure that there's no inconsistencies. And if there was an update of, the tables, the slides that we've used over the last year versus what is in the final document. So we'll make sure everything is correct and you can rely on the data.
Okay, great. Very much appreciated, Paula. Have a good day. Okay, next item up is the Florida Transportation Plan and Highway Safety Update from FDOT.
Yeah, Alex Henry's presenting. Alex, I have it pulled up on my computer, or I can make you the presenter.
If you can make me the presenter, that'd probably be easiest.
All right. All right, you should get it now.
All right, can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Great. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alex Henry. I'm the bicycle pedestrian, also the public involvement coordinator for FDOT District 7. And today I'm going to be giving an overview of our ongoing update to the Florida Transportation Plan, or the FTP, and also our update to our Strategic Highway Safety Plan, or SHSP, updated in coordination. So basically, I'll just be giving an overview of kind of what these plans are, what the process is that goes into updating them, some of the key things that we're looking at, and then also highlight some opportunities that exist for you all to get involved and provide input as we continue to develop both of these plans. So what is the FTP? Just to kind of start off. So the FTP is basically the single overarching statewide plan kind of guiding all of Florida's future. And it is intended to be a plan for all of Florida, consistent with local plans and other efforts that are going on as well. So what the FTP really does is it provides kind of a framework that guides at the DOT level, all of our planning programs and all of our activities, which then in turn helps influence the types of projects that eventually become studied and developed and eventually programmed and can make it into our 5-year work program. So it's really our foundational document that kind of helps drives all of our policies, and all of our projects should be consistent with the goals that we established as part of this process. Why does the FTP matter, other than the reasons just discussed? Again, it kind of guides state, regional, local transportation decision making investment, providing that framework. Of ways that past FTP updates have kind of advanced Florida's transportation system and changed the way that we kind of look at transportation and make decision makings. One of the most notable examples 20 years ago now, in 2000, was the 2020, looking at 2020 FTP update, introduced the concept of the Strategic Intermodal System, or SIS, which many of you have likely heard of. Kind of provides a new framework for which we started planning and programming major investments for routes of regional significance and freight and things like that. So definitely a huge change that came out of FTP updates. Some other things are in 2005, an increased focus on regional visioning and collaboration. In 2010, we saw an alignment with Florida's strategic plan for economic development, and also Florida's mobilities and trade plans. So kind of beginning to look at a closer tie between our transportation planning and our economic development and freight planning. And then in 2015, which is our current FTP, our most recent iteration of the FTP, introduced concepts of resilience, which we are definitely building upon as part of this FTP update, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And introduced workforce development as being a potential focus and strategy, which is something that we're beginning to see really permeate here in the Tampa Bay area as we program workforce development projects for a lot of our major upcoming major projects that we have going on around the district, Gateway project and Dallas and others, and also choices. So basically, really putting a focus on looking at and providing more choices other than driving in your car alone. So we've seen that really permeate through a lot of the department's policies since 2015. We've adopted a statewide complete streets policy, which has been put in place to help promote the expansion of choices and things like that. So the things that we come up with out of these plans really do matter and really do have impacts. A little bit of an overview of kind of what how the FTP is formatted. So basically, there's three major plan elements that make up the FTP. The first of which is the vision element, which kind of focuses on major trends, uncertainties, and themes that we feel like have the potential to shape the future transportation over a long period. So it typically looks out like 50 years and tries to identify trends and disruptors that we really need to be paying attention to as we're thinking that far ahead. So this is really, it's a visual document kind of highlighting major trends and providing key statistics that kind of provides a framework for the rest of the plan. I actually just got an email about 10 minutes ago, right before I started this presentation, announcing that the vision element of this FTP update has been completed and uploaded to the Florida Transportation Plan website, which I have a link to later on the document. So I would definitely encourage you guys to check that out, hot off the press. From there, we also have the policy element, which is really kind of the meat and potatoes of the FTP plan update. It's what establishes our goals and objectives that are going to be guiding that decision-making process. It looks at about 25 years, kind of in coordination with the time frame that MPO's LRTP plans are looking at as well. For this update, as we'll talk about a little bit, really the heart of this plan is going to be focusing around 4 cross-cutting topics that we feel really hit on a lot of the plan's gold, but I'll go into more detail on that in a couple of slides. And then finally, we also have an implementation element, which kind of zeroes in on key actions and goals established as part of that policy element, and looks at a shorter time frame, so outside of our work program, but 5 to 25 years, and developing more specific strategies to help kind of move those things forward. The FTP is being updated in coordination with a steering committee that is made up of 34 members from all types of different organizations. We have other governmental agencies, both federal, such as the Federal Highway Administration, other state agencies, such as the Department of Health, some local representation from kind of coalitions of local government bodies, such as the MPO, as well as some more private sector nonprofit type of representatives as well. So the idea is that this steering committee provides input from their unique perspectives to really steer the way the plan is going, and making sure that it's something that is representative and works for a wide swath of transportation stakeholders around the state. Within that steering committee, we also have 3 separate subcommittees that are comprised of members of the larger steering committee. Those committees are, there's one looking at automated, connected, electric, and shared vehicles, really focused on the potential impacts of emerging technologies and business practices. There's a subcommittee that is focused on resilience, so looking not only at environmental and weather considerations, which is maybe what you would typically think of when you look at think of resilience, but also economic, operational, and other disrupting factors that have the potential to kind of challenge the way that we think about transportation. You know, our recent global pandemic being an example of maybe a disruptor that we wouldn't normally think of when we talk about resilience. But thinking about things like that and basically how we can orient our transportation system to absorb, withstand, and recover from these said disruptors. And then we also have a subcommittee that is focused on safety, which is kind of providing a link between this plan and also guiding some of the update to the strategic highway safety plan, which we'll touch on a little bit. So you can visit the Florida Transportation Plan website here to become a friend of these subcommittees, basically be included on all of the meeting distribution information, get invited to the meetings, and kind of keep on top of it as far as that. So these are the 8 goals that have been established for this FTP update. These 8 goals are very much consistent with the goals of previous FTP updates. However, we have kind of refined some of the language to be a little more in touch with some specific feedback that we got from our steering committee about things that we should be focusing on. So for instance, I mentioned the last FTP introduced a focus on providing choices. And in that FTP update, the goal was kind of phrased as more transportation choices for freight and people. So it's good, but we've kind of strengthened that language and focused a little bit in this FTP update, changing it to, as you can see, transportation choices that improve accessibility and equity. So taking that input from our partner agencies and our steering committee to kind of refine and focus really what we're looking at as far as these goals. As I'll talk about in a second, when we looked at these, we noticed really 4 cross-cutting topics that have come across all of these goal areas, and as such, we're really kind of zoning on those areas when looking at developing the specific objectives and goals that we're going to be, or the objectives and strategies that we're going to be looking at to help meet these goals, which is where we're at right now in the FTP update process. So those 4 cross-cutting topics, 2 of them we've already talked about a little bit. Technology, so really looking at potential impacts on automated connected electric vehicles and shared vehicles, and the immense impact that those may have on a whole variety of transportation planning considerations. Looking at TSM&O, ITS, smart city type applications, leveraging technology to help us more effectively manage our transportation system. Big data. And then also looking at kind of new materials and processes. So how is 3D printing kind of shaping our shipping industries? How is telework have the potential to kind of change our commuting patterns as we've been seeing recently? So kind of factoring all that in and considering how that plays in to all the goals that we mentioned in the previous slide. Again, resilience, looking at all kinds of different potential disruptors and considering how we could be in a better spot to respond and bounce back from those. And then also looking at state and regional considerations, basically the function of our transportation system as interregional facilities providing interregional freight and movement of people and goods. And then also focusing on transportation issues that are a little more local in scope, regional in scope, congestion relief, land use and community planning, tying into regional visions, economic development, things like that. So these are the 4 things that we've kind of seen as touching a lot of the different goals that we've established as part of this. And we're really interested in getting specific feedback on how people perceive these issues and how they see them kind of influencing Florida's transportation futures. So something that we've done is we've actually developed surveys for each of these cross-cutting topics with kind of targeted questions to help gather that feedback. We provided the link to each of the surveys in the agenda packet, and we can also, they're also on the FTP website, which I'll share the link for that again later. So I would definitely encourage you guys to check those out, provide your feedback and share them with your networks as well, so we can get as much feedback from our stakeholders as possible. So what are we doing with that input? So we're receiving input through a number of means, through the surveys I discussed, for meetings like this, where we're kind of sharing what we're doing, and any comments or feedback that I get after this presentation, I'll document and we'll send up to the folks in central office that are managing this update as well. We're also planning a regional workshop that is focused on engaging our local and regional partners here in District 7, as well as the public. We were hoping to have it in July, but obviously hosting in-person meetings is a bit challenging right now. So we're looking at options to push that out later into the fall, either in an in-person or an online format. So stay tuned for that. But anyways, there's a few different methods in which we're collecting and looking for input. All the input that we receive gets funneled back to our policy team in central office, who feeds it to the steering committee that I mentioned, and they use all that input when they're discussing and reviewing potential strategies and objectives that get fed into the FTP. So the input that everyone provides is kind of something that the steering committee is using and weighing as they make decisions on how to kind of shape the FTP. So your input is definitely welcome and crucial to this process. So I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation just talking briefly about the update of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, which is also being updated in coordination with the FTP. So Wide Vision Zero, as you may know, FDOT's statewide target for fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway system is 0. We feel that this is the only acceptable goal, and that one traffic fatality or serious injury is too many. However, there is still obviously very much work to do to achieve this vision. And what State Strategic Highway Safety Plan does is it kind of provides a roadmap of how we're going to achieve those goals and achieve that vision. So it kind of acts as a statewide coordinated safety plan that provides a comprehensive framework for reducing fatalities and serious injuries on all public roads. So not just FDOT roads, not just state roads, but all public roads. And it identifies key safety needs and guides investment decisions towards strategies and countermeasures that have the most potential to save lives. As I mentioned, there is a standalone FTP subcommittee that is focused on safety and kind of guiding the update process. This is just kind of a look at who is on that subcommittee. Again, a pretty diverse it's pretty diverse in terms of the number of agencies that are serving in the subcommittee, governmental people, we have law enforcement representation, some nonprofit and private sector representation as well. A little bit of input onto what goes into the update of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So the first thing that is done is we do a big statewide analysis of crash data and other trends that could be affecting fatalities and serious injuries in the roadway system. We do a deep dive into data and use that to select emphasis areas. So certain types of crashes and safety issues that seem to be overrepresented and prevalent in the crash data, we kind of zone in on those and establish, these are really the areas that we're going to focus on and develop specific strategies and actions based on data-driven and proven effective approaches to help drive those fatalities and serious injuries down. So that's kind of the point where we're at right now. We've done the deep data dive. We've identified our emphasis areas, and right now the steering committee is in the process of determining what those strategies and what those specific actions are going to be. So it's a really good time to provide any input or thoughts that you may have to, so that can be fed into that process. A few other things that go into it is a review of public and partner input received during the FTP update process. Again, kind of creating a feedback loop to make sure that your input is being considered, and then also coordination with MPO and other regional local partners to make sure that what we're proposing is consistent with various safety plans they have as well before it is reviewed and approved by our signing partners, which is FDOT and many of those partner agencies which we've highlighted previously. So to finish off, I just wanted to kind of give a highlight of some of the crash trends that we have kind of noticed as part of that deep dive of statewide crash data that I mentioned. This is just kind of a look at our roadway fatality trend from 2012 to 2018, which is the year where we have the most recent year where we have certified, verified crash data. So as you can see, although the last 3 observable years, the number of fatalities has remained largely flat, we've still seen a pretty significant increase since our last FTP update, and there's definitely a lot of work still to be done. Some major takeaways from that deep dive of the data, and a lot of this is consistent with some of the things that Paula was sharing in their crash analysis. We found that the highest rate of fatalities and serious injuries statewide was in the 20 to 35 age group. Drivers 65 and up, although involved in less of these crashes, were more likely to be killed or seriously injured when they were involved in these types of crashes. And conversely, that teen drivers were more likely to be involved in crash, but were less likely to be killed or severely injured. We found that our highest number of fatalities were in our urban areas, but when you look at fatality rates, so controlling for population and the amount of traffic, our highest fatality rates were actually in our rural areas. Considering we need to have a kind of a wide swath of different countermeasures, to look at two kind of unique safety issues facing both our urban and rural areas. Most fatalities and serious injuries did occur on state-maintained roadways. And the majority of fatality and serious injuries that are intersection related happened at four-way or T intersections, which certainly makes sense. We found that more fatalities occurred at night, and about half of these occurred on lighting facilities, or in other words, about half of them occurred on facilities that were not lit or was not determined. However, more serious injuries occurred during the day, which I thought was interesting. And then finally, most crashes involving fatality or serious injury occur when the weather is clear, suggesting that weather issues, wet roadways are likely not one of the major contributing causes to many of these crashes. So I mentioned earlier the emphasis areas that we focused on. So these are the emphasis areas that have been identified as part of this Strategic Highway Safety Plan update. They're largely consistent with many of the emphasis areas that we focused on in the last update. As you can see, there's different kind of types of categories of emphasis areas that we look at. Some of it is looking at specific crash types, such as lane departures, intersections. Others are more focused on users, such as biped, motorcyclists. More and more focused on demographics, such as teen drivers and aging road users. And some are kind of more behavior focused, such as impaired driving and speeding and aggressive driving. So kind of a wide variety of different emphasis areas that will definitely require specific and thoughtful objectives and countermeasures, which is kind of what we're in the process of developing right now. And then last thing, just kind of to give you an idea of how we've been doing with these emphasis areas compared to the last 5-year period that we were looking at with the last FTP update. As you can see, although serious injuries have largely stayed about the same or decreased with some emphasis areas, we're seeing pretty much across the board increases in our number of fatalities associated with these emphasis areas, which again reinforces how important it is for us to really start addressing these, and how much work there still is to be done. That hopefully this HSAP update can get us a little closer to. Just to follow up, some additional resources to learn more about the FTP plan update. Our website, FloridaTransportationPlan.com, is a wealth of information for you to learn more about the various efforts, learn some statistics about those various cross-cutting topics we talked about, take those surveys, get more engaged with our safety subcommittees, and to learn more about just where the FTP is at in its update process periodically. So I definitely encourage you guys to check that out and to learn more. But that is all I had for my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions or feedback. Again, we're really using these presentations as an opportunity to get feedback from different groups. So if there's anything that you think that we should is really important to you or your agency, or you feel that we should be paying special attention to or considering as part of this update, please let me know, and I'll be sure to make note of that, and it'll get fed back to the steering committees. So thank you.
Okay, great, Alex. Thank you very much for that. Before I throw it to the committee for questions or comments, he asked about doing surveys, and I'd like to challenge the committee to get on the agenda packet and look at the surveys and do them. If you haven't had a chance, I haven't completed them yet, but some people get scared off. They're literally 1 page long each. They're only 2 to 3 questions. It's not something that's gonna, hold you for an hour. So it's invaluable feedback for them. So I really hope that the committee can fill those out and help out DOT with some of their data gathering ideas. Is there anybody that has comments from the committee? Okay, Alex, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, especially listening to the updates of the Florida Transportation Plan, they're very much in line with a lot of what I've seen MPO undertake and we're already involved with, and then emphasizing, and you speak of resiliency, that's a big one for me. And I've noticed, in the recent years, it's become a more focal topic. So certainly that's something from my side, I'll put in the survey that, the importance of recognizing changes that are happening and the need to plan now for the future and making sure where possible that the more vulnerable roadways are hardened and trying to anticipate for things down the line is super important. And that's one area I personally would emphasize, but it sounds like you're already on top of it. And I like to see that you've got the ACES committee looking at the infrastructure for different alternative type vehicles that may be coming down the line and trying to accommodate those on the front end rather than the back. So those are all great things. But other than that, like I said, I'm going to ask the committee to complete the comments, and unless anybody has anything else, let me know now. Give you a 2 count. 1002. Okay, great. Alex, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, and the last scheduled agenda item is the Plant City Transit Plan.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, I'm bringing the presenter. Just give me a second.
No problem.
Can you see my screen now?
I can.
Okay. Good afternoon, all. This is Vishaka Shivaraman. I'm from MPO Transportation Committee. So just wanted to give you a quick update about the Plant City Transit Study today. Just give me a second. Just to give you a quick update on the project background. This is the Plant City, location-wise, it is in between Tampa and Lakeland and Cole County. This city is approximately 29 square miles with 40,000 residents. Plant City supports transit-oriented development and increased densities and intensities as part of their comprehensive plan. Just to let you know that this study is consistent with the long-range transportation plan, and it will feed into the study will feed into the comprehensive operation analysis for the HART. This slide just gives you an update about the study area, what we have identified as the study team. The study area is bounded by Knights Griffin Road on the north, the State Road 60 on the south, and County Line to the east, and Branch Force to the west side. The study area includes City of Plant City and the unincorporated parts of Hillsborough County. The purpose of the study is twofold. It is
Can't see the slides.
Oh, you can't?
Yeah, I was just about to say, Vishaka, I wasn't able to see him. I didn't know if it was my computer. I'm seeing looks more like a harbor somewhere.
Sunset, sunrise.
Froze. I can do it on my end, and then you can just tell me when to.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, let me see.
You have it pulled up? I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was advancing.
What slide were you on?
Did you see the map of the area, study area?
No, could you go back to the map and just start from
Yes,
there?
go back.
Okay, I'll stop there. All right.
Thanks for letting me know. I'm sorry. It shows to me that I'm showing my screen. So.
And can you all see the presentation now?
See it now.
Okay. Good, great, good.
So yeah, this is the study area. Like I said before, you can see that it includes part of the unincorporated Hillsborough County and Plant City. The main points to be considered here it's State Road 60 on the south, County Line, Knights Griffin on the north, and Branch Forbes to the west side. Next slide, please. This slide shows you the purpose of the study. Like I said, this is a feasibility study, and there is two parts to it. We are trying to identify the potential transit service to be operated from Plant City to downtown Tampa, which is like an express service. Additionally, we are also looking at evaluating the possibility of a circulator which can run through downtown Plant City. In future, the study will look at extending the service to Lakeland, Polk County. This study will actually, what we are doing in the study, it's a transit plan. So we will be evaluating the cost estimates for operations, which can tie into the HART's COA and the transit development plan. Next slide, please. There were previous services in Plant City. So just to give you an idea, initially in early 2000s, there was a circulator within Plant City, and that's what it shows in the map on the right side. If you can see it, it was kind of 4 different routes, Route 70, 71, 72, and 73, and that was operating separately, connecting to downtown. The average peak ridership was around 2002 to 3, which was around 70,000 annual ridership, annual monthly ridership. But towards 2008, this service was not supporting, so HART had to close it, and the city was operating it for a while, and they also couldn't support this service. So that was one of the services. The other one was a HART Route 28X, which was an East County Express, which operated from downtown, which operated from Tampa to kind of, if you can see that in the map, it shows the yellow line shows the 28 Express. It kind of stopped at the outskirts of Plant City at Tonotosasa at a park and ride location. So that also wasn't able to support it after 2017, so HART had to stop that service. And currently there's only Sunshine Line, which provides on-demand services, and they have their own conditions for that transportation disadvantaged riders. Next slide, please. This is what shows the project management team. Hillsborough County MPO is the primary study team, and it also includes HART staff. The other stakeholders we have identified throughout the study was Plant City zoning, Polk County, Hillsborough Community College, some of the major employers within Plant City, Sunshine Line, Citrus Connection, and other Chamber of Commerce and other services you can see here. Next slide, please. Sarah? Okay, thanks. So far, the study was started in January, and it was kind of expected as a short-term study. So in that study, we implemented a stakeholder focus group meeting. The first meeting was held back in February, where we identified a list of stakeholders, which you saw in the previous slide. We looked at travel market condition analysis, and also we looked at existing conditions in the study to see how we can improve this. I mean, this was mainly as a feedback to get input from the stakeholders. The study was done like a workshop session with tables, and they were split into different working groups, and we got some answers, which I will show you later on. The next part of the study was a stakeholder focus group meeting 2, which we conducted in May, and that was to present the initial alternatives to the stakeholder team. In the future, we will be having a public open house to present the existing conditions and the alternatives identified, which will help us to narrow down to the alternatives more better. We haven't figured out the format of the meeting yet. Next slide, please. So this was the first stakeholder meeting we had back in February 2020. Sarah, next slide, please. Like I explained to you before, there were 3, the study team was split into 3 groups, where the maps, we were identifying existing conditions, areas of future growth, and communities of concern. So the activities were divided into based on those 3 themes, if you would want to call it, and which helped us to identify the benefits. Of course, you know, it's accessibility, mobility, safety, and economic development. So that's what it supports. There are, of course, challenges to this transit, whereas the main thing is funding and operating cost, getting support from leadership, and the current kind of development pattern, which is in Plant City, which it's not conducive to transportation. There also needs to be a shift in focus to use public transit. And the other thing which we identified were how to overcome these challenges and how to make this successful transit was through more community outreach, expectations for the service, the reliability, and first last mile connections, and implementing transit in stages rather than as one step, which will help towards the regional transit mode. Next slide, please. Like I had mentioned previously, the other things we identified were through the maps, which were mainly the corridors. The key corridors you can see are the primary centers, primary places in downtown, grocery stores, hospitals, banks, schools, Strawberry Square, and other the major roadways. The group identified that they prefer express road between Tampa, Plant City, and in the future Lakeland. We need to capture transit-dependent populations. That was one of the main challenges and one of the key ideas behind this service. In the future growth scenario, we identified that more residential development is needed to support this transit, and the group identified that increasing the infill developments within the downtown core and having more offices space will help to support the transit. There is also a need for expanded roadway infrastructure to support the future growth, because there were many employers coming in the future based on the current development pattern. And the main employers were South Florida Baptist Hospital and Hillsborough Community College. There was also a lot of warehousing and industrial development coming towards the southeast part of the study area, which was identified as one of the major areas for service in the future. Next slide, please. The second stakeholder meeting was held back in May 2020, and I will explain to you. Sarah, please. There were two parts of the study, I mentioned before. So the first option was to identify the circulator. The study group identified two options for the circulators. If you can see in the map towards the right, this was identified as one of the route, which was a combination of the previous existing Strawberry connector. If you recall, it was a combination of two routes from there. And the study area was, the transit route would approximately cover 10 miles. There were a few assumptions for the operating cost and the basic capital cost. Assuming those, the operating cost would come to $500 to $600K per year, plus a para-transit cost element was also there, which would bring the cost per vehicle trip to approximately $90 to $100, and with a frequency of 60 minutes, because the travel time for a round trip would be 50 minutes going through downtown, having that route, which is shown in the map here. Next slide, please. Going in the model with HART's downtowner, we identified another kind of option, which would be to run an on-demand point-to-point service, which was, like I mentioned before, one of the challenges was to have the first mile, last mile connection. So having a downtown connector would be helpful to do that. And comparing it with the downtown, the size of Tampa, we figured out that the operating cost would be $1.6 million to operate 6 vehicles. This can be achieved through a fund grant of at least 50% local match, and this would be supporting 14,000 passengers. And the per passenger cost bearable for HART would be $5. The average wait time, which is currently in Tampa, is 15 minutes, so that's pretty reliable for this service. And keep in mind that the amount is borne by HART right now. It's not the passenger mile. It's not the passenger cost. It's currently provided by HART. So that's another option. Next slide, please. Coming to talk about the express routes. There were 4 options which were identified. The option 1 would be the previous 28X route service. We identified the same route. Which would make a final destination stop right outside of Plant City limits. This is one of the options. I'll go into the details later. The second option, please. Next slide. So the second option which was identified was express route connecting from Tampa to Plant City via Lakeland, and finally connecting to Lakeland. And this route would be from downtown to kind of jogs towards Net Park, stopping at Plant City and an Amazon Center warehouse, and then connecting to Lakeland. That connection would be need to be coordinated with Citrus connection. That was the second option. Next slide, please. The third option, what you can see, is a similar route connecting to Lakeland, but it goes through Mango, Walmart, and there is already an existing line till there. So this would be connecting to from there. It would connect to Plant City and finally to Lakeland via MLK. Next slide, please. The fourth option is actually an extension of the current Route 38, which is served by Hart, and it stops at Mango, Walmart. So that would be an extension from there to Plant City. So it's a Route 38 extension. Next slide, please. So when I talked about 4 of those options, we were just comparing the different options, and the annual operating cost you can see varies from 200K to around 450K for the different options evaluated. The first option and the fourth option are shorter routes, so that accounts for the lesser amount. And the frequency is roughly the same, and the travel time varies from 45 to 55 minutes. These are this was the main synopsis of the comparison. Next slide, please. Keep in mind that these were all planning level costs. So this is what we presented to the public, the stakeholder group. It was an open meeting, and we did not have anyone from the public. So given those things, the next steps of the study would be more public outreach through an open house meeting. We will let the committee know that what is the format of the meeting in the coming months. This would help us to narrow the alternatives and finalize the planning level costs for the different alternatives. Like I said, we are just preparing this as a cost estimate. The what could be implemented would be at the discretion of Hart and Plant City. With that, that's all I have for this. If there's any questions, I can take them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Shaka, do we have any questions from the committee?
This is Chris Deanontis with T-BART. I have a question.
Sure.
You referred to ridership in one of the earlier slides at 70,000 annual ridership, but you also referred to it as peak average ridership. So I was wondering if you can just clarify, 70,000 seems correct for annual, but it does not seem correct for monthly average.
Just give me a second. I'm just going back to the
earlier in the presentation.
Yeah, I do remember that. Just trying to pull up the previous slide. Sarah.
While you're looking for that, I just want to let you know that this is a T-BARTA project that I'm about to talk about. District 1 has asked us to look at feasibility of BRT, similar to what's being proposed for 275, but from a Sunrail station that's out on the eastern end of Lakeland to run along I-4 to downtown Tampa. So I just want to make you aware of that project. It's in the scoping phase right now, but it's something we're going to be looking at it at some point.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yes, prior to this.
Because what I have is the peak average monthly ridership during the first year of implementation was what I had.
2002, 2003 ridership, we said 70,000, but in the beginning, right before that, you also mentioned it was peak average monthly or something like that.
Yes, that's what I have here. That's what I have as recorded, but I will just make sure that the numbers I presented to you are correct once more, because I have it in my notes as that's what I had in my notes. But since you mentioned that number doesn't, do you think that that was an average annual and not a monthly?
No, I think that was annual is what it sounds like to me, but yeah, you'd need to verify. Anyway.
Yeah, this was 4 different routes, so I'm assuming that those are correct, but I will definitely check back into it because around the last year operation, we had only around 12 passengers per hour, or when the service was in the lowest ridership, and the highest was 70,000 per month, and that's what I had in my notes. But I will definitely check back on those numbers, and I have the details of from the Excel spreadsheet what I received from HART. So I will definitely look into that, and I will check those numbers for you. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Hey,
Thank you.
Vishaka, this is Nicole McCleary from HART, and I was just able to look at our ridership for the 28X for those years of operation, and it looks like our average ridership was between 10,000 and 13,000. So our highest year for, and this is specific to Route 28X.
No, I think he asked the question for the Strawberry Connection route. That was what the numbers I presented as in 70,000. It's in, and Sarah, go to that slide. It's in one of the slides down further. The previous service.
Do you know which slide it is?
I need to.
I don't recall what slide it was.
Let me pull that slide.
It's one of the earlier slides.
It's probably slide.
It was probably talking
slide
about
5.
previous service, HART previous service.
So that's slide 5.
Oh God.
Yeah.
There it is.
So, yeah, this is what you asked, right? Nicole, I think he was mentioning the Plant City Strawberry Connector route, so it is not the HART 28 Express.
Yeah, anyway, it's not a huge deal. If you could just check those numbers, $70,000 for monthly sounds like a lot.
Yeah, I will check those numbers for you.
Yeah, I will also check, and I will coordinate with Nicole and give you back a response.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, and I think that's a lot of that is just for clarification. So as you're probably presenting these to more committees, you know, to have the more updated info, just to keep future questions from coming up. It's a good time to check with Nicole. I'm sure she'll have the numbers.
Sure. Yeah, I think the numbers came from them only, so I will check back with them.
Okay. I remember when you said it, I in my mind it seemed like a jump, but I didn't correlate it totally, but it seemed like that was like something was a little bit off. So.
Yeah, that's about 200. That's over 200 passengers per day.
Okay. So, yeah, makes sense. I will get.
Do you have any other questions or comments? Just out of curiosity, Vishaka, and again, this is coming from somebody who doesn't know a lot about this, but as far as like planning a new route, like to downtown Tampa, is there ever a consideration for like doing a 3-month pilot on a route just to see what kind of ridership they would get, and then kind of pulling back and deciding after that whether you know, that was going to be a route they were going to fully engage? Is that even practical? Maybe Nicole would answer that better than me.
I think Nicole can answer that question better, because this is definitely what we are looking at is not a full implementation. It's a planning level study. So
right.
The routes and the implementation would all be up to her to figure out. So I think Nicole.
Yeah, it was just something.
A good option, but yeah, it's a good option.
I mean, we have done pilots in the past, so that's definitely something that could be looked at. One of the things here, though, is really getting Plant City involved and helping with the cost of running service out there, because they're not currently part of our ad valorem. So this study really is going to look at the cost of providing transit out there, and then give us kind of that segue to open talks with Plant City in seeing if they're interested in becoming part of the ad valorem, and then how we would work that out.
Okay, I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, good option, but yeah, that's a good option.
I mean, I know there's a cost. It's just one of those things when you sit and you hear about all these projections on ridership or you know, attendance when you're going to build arenas and so forth, and you never really know until it's implemented if there was a way to kind of find out how many people that said they would ride it are actually riding it. But I know that's a money and a manpower and you know, and infrastructure and all that stuff. But just one of those things. Again, I'm not in that world of on the transit side. Just thought I'd ask. Okay, any other questions?
But Jeff, just wanted to quickly let you know that we are actually running a survey to collect that kind of information, and the survey has been distributed through our website and to some of the other groups in Plant City, mainly to see their interest and what they foresee. So that will help us to collect more information on what they anticipate or what they desire. So,
okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
with that,
just one more thing. So I was just able to look at the strawberry connector, and it looks like the peak average in 2002 was about 35,000.
The monthly average?
No, so that was for the year.
annual.
Okay. So I think there was some error.
We were about 3,000 in ridership.
Okay. Thanks for pointing that mistake, Nicole. I will make a correction in the future in this presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, I think that covers the last item on the agenda. So with that, we will move forward. Is there any old or new business that the committee wants to bring forward?
This is Gina from the MPO staff. I just wanted to jump in and make sure I see that we still have Leland there. If we're hoping to use your recessed July meeting of the TAC for a workshop that we can kind of review some of the really exciting and groundbreaking documents, like their context classification and the update to the design manual. And I wanted to make sure that was still something Leland wanted to do, and we just wanted to pull together an agenda, and I had added some things on there that I thought would be interesting to talk about, but if it prolongs the meeting, maybe we could just jump into the meat of whatever it is that, like the context class, kind of like the presentation I just heard from Angelo. So what do you think, Leland? Are you still up for it?
I don't hear him.
Yeah, I see that
He's still showing muted.
Yeah, and then and Mike, I don't know if maybe Mike Williams knows anything about that as well. I just want to reserve that time, and I want to send out an agenda. I just want to make sure that this is something you guys are.
Well, I know we talked about it. I think it was the last meeting, because I think July is normally we don't have a meeting, so it was. I believe you brought it forward to potentially have this inserted. I'm certainly fine with it. I mean, you can, as far as I'm concerned, and I would ask the committee to participate as much. It won't be an official meeting, but you could, send it out to all the individuals as if it was, and just ask them to attend. But it won't be formal.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for your still being interested. I really think it's going to be. I think that they're doing some really amazing things. It'd be nice that we can weigh in on it if they'd like us to. So. My plan is to move forward, and if I don't hear any differently, I'll probably stick to something close to this agenda format, and maybe it'll be different on the day of if I get some feedback. But it'll definitely be useful for all of us really to know what's going on there, and hopefully that we'll give some good feedback to the county. So without any of the county staff jumping in, I'm going to assume, no news is good news. Like, I'm just forward with what I've got going.
Okay. Yeah, that's about all I can offer. So I guess maybe just reach out to them off air, and make sure that there's still interest, and that they're still agreeable to holding it to coincide with our normal time and so forth. And we should hopefully get at least a reasonable turnout to participate. And then as far as that goes, I'm not sure the date of the August meeting, but it should be, we'll send it out a week or two prior to the announcement, so everybody will be back on schedule with their regular meetings. But I would ask everybody to be available as much as possible for the July 20th, assuming that goes forward. All right, any other comments or questions or business?
I was just going to say the August meeting is August 17th.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. So it sounds like that's about it, unless I'll give you the going once, going twice. So with that, I guess we will officially end the meeting. Thanks everybody for attending.
Thank you.